Donald McShane, thank you very much. We'll come back to you shortly. Of course, we are still hours away from polls closing here in the New York primary. And all eyes roll certainly on Donald Trump. The big question is, will he sweep, take all 95 of the delegates, or will Cruz or Kasich deny him that total victory? Joining me now, Ed Cox, Mica Mosbacher, Amy Tarkanian, and Senator Scott Brown. I want to go to you first, Ed, because you're the New York GOP chairman. And as we were sitting here, I said, well, it doesn't feel like there's any drama tonight. But you said there's a lot of drama.
Exactly what Connell said. The drama is, does Donald Trump do very well or extremely well? If he doesn't get 90 or let's say even 80 out of the 95 delegates, he will have a very hard time at winning.
Is there a possibility of a combination of Donald Trump winning 54% of the vote in line with the polls and still getting only 80 delegates?
Yeah, he could get, because it's also congressional district by congressional district. But if he let's say he goes beneath 50%, that's only a drop of, let's say, 6% from the most recent polls. He would probably lose 20 to 25 of those delegates. In the end of it, he will win each of the congressional districts. Kasich will be the one who picks it, not Cruz. It could also give Kasich some real momentum going into the remainder of the state.
So Mica, your guy, Ted Cruz, didn't really spend a lot of time in New York. He picked some, in my mind, some pretty interesting places. They say his best chance may be with the Jewish vote on Staten Island. How do you see him doing tonight?
Yes, well, first of all, women voted for the first time in America in New York in 1917. Woohoo! He resonates well with women voters, all ages, all faiths. So in looking at New York, I think he will be able to maybe cherry pick a few delegates out of Bronx, Queens, and possibly Brooklyn, and then maybe going up into Rochester in a northern part of the state.
Yeah.
He is not here tonight because he's in Pennsylvania, so he's looking forward and beyond to Indiana.
A lot of reports about already some shenanigans going on in Pennsylvania. We'll talk about that later. But Amy, I want to stick with New York right now, and it does feel like the sleeper here is your guy Kasich, that perhaps he'll be able to come in. Maybe his polling, national polling, certainly has been edging up here a little bit, and he may come in second place. But Ed is saying if he gets enough delegates, this will give him some momentum.
Absolutely, this will give him enough momentum, because now you have the upcoming states, especially on April 26th, such as Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island, where he is scheduled to do extremely well. You know, you have Senator Cruz and Donald Trump both realizing that behind the scenes, as far as the delegate count goes in a number of these states, that on that second round ballot, and when it comes convention time, Kasich is going to be a thorn in their side.
Yeah, maybe in the third or fourth or fifth round. I'm not sure in the second round. But let me go to Senator Brown and talk about that. You know, Donald Trump is the man who always who talks about things being large, being huge, or huge in his case. Is it 95? Is anything less than 95 delegates? Can we say that to a certain degree that's failure for Donald Trump?
No, of course not. If you win your home state, that's, first of all, that's the first goal, which is what Ted and Marco, he said if you don't win your own state, you shouldn't even be in the race. So he's going to win the state. But the question is by how much. It'd certainly be wonderful to get the 95 delegates, but you know, who knows? I mean, we can all sit here and like pontificate forever. There are certain pockets. I have a lot of relatives. Yeah, I have a lot of relatives who live in New York, and if you go up in the Syracuse, Ithaca area, that block, there is a so-called conservative party, one of the only ones in the country, and they may, either Kasich or Cruz may pick off a couple there, but I think it's Donald's to lose, and we'll see what happens. And when you talk about Kasich being the nominee at the convention, with all due respect, I like him a lot. It's never going to happen. None of those Trump or Cruz supporters are going to support him.
Yeah,
period.
I agree.
It's just not going to happen. And he's there as a spoiler, period. And he's spoiling to make sure that Donald or Ted, quite frankly, doesn't get the votes. And if Donald gets all the votes tonight, then it's almost mathematically impossible for Cruz to get the magical number. So he's still the one to beat. If he wins them all tonight, it's 300 up, and that's a tough obstacle to overcome.
Amy, what's your reply to that? Why is Kasich hanging around?
Well, you know, you joke about it possibly going to third, fourth, or fifth ballot before people pay attention to Kasich. I don't believe that's the case. We've now, as Republicans, had 10 contested conventions, and out of those 10, I believe 6 or 7 of those, the lead nominee ended up not being the actual nominee. So let's just sit back and watch. I'm waiting for Governor Kasich to take the lead.
All right, real quick, Senator Brown, before we move on, I just got to ask, if Donald Trump gets 54% of the vote and over 90% of the delegates, will we stop hearing about how unfair the GOP system is?
Well, listen, we've had this conversation before. I think he should just focus on getting down and really battling in those states that have caucuses and have a different way of doing it. But what he is bringing to light, Charles, and you've said this before, is the kind of parochialism in each individual state that allows for different formats, different ways to win delegates. What potentially could happen in Pennsylvania is like, really?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later because already we know a lot of these delegates are for Ted Cruz, no matter how many votes he does or does not get. We'll talk about that later in the show. Also, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, they're facing off tonight in New York. And while on the Democratic side, there are 247 delegates up for grab. It's more proportional. But the big question is it in the bag for Hillary? Can she win big? That's next. Jolene Kent, thank you very, very much. All right, let's get a reaction from Mica Mosbacher, Senator Scott Brown, and Ford O'Connell. Ford, let me start with you. You know, listen, New York, I think, is sort of unique. I wouldn't necessarily use it as a template or a proxy for the rest of the country, but 56% saying that Donald Trump would be the best candidate against Hillary Clinton seems to be he's growing momentum in that category.
Well, I think it's going to be a big night for Donald Trump. The only question is how big. He should probably get 2/3 of the 95 delegates without breaking a sweat. If he gets north of 83 delegates out of 95, he's had a good night. And if he gets 95 delegates, 100%, it's a huge night for Donald Trump. But let's not mistake, as you pointed out, geography in New York with momentum for Donald Trump going forward. The month of April should be the month of Trump. In May, he may run into some roadblocks.
Although, Senator Brown, we got Pennsylvania, we've got Maryland, we've got New Jersey. Donald Trump polling extraordinarily well there, although we've already hinted at the fact that there was a survey taken of over 100 delegates from Pennsylvania. It already feels to me that the fix, if you will, is in.
Well, certainly hope not, Charles. And just to step back for 1 minute, one thing that people have always been criticizing Trump for is that, oh, he only gets 30, 35, 40%. Well, if he wins by over 50% in a closed primary, which is in New York, that I think says a lot. And don't forget, you have Rhode Island, obviously, and Connecticut in there as well. But yes, if in fact he wins away in Pennsylvania, you would think that the delegates would have, I would think, an affirmative obligation to actually go forward and support that nominee. That's what the Democrats are complaining about on their side with the superdelegates. You know, Sanders is crushing in New Hampshire in particular, and yet he gets the superdelegates and he ends up with more delegates. I believe it's wrong. We know what the process is. We know it's parochial, but if the guy wins by 40, 50, 60%, he gets that number, and the other guys get 20, 30, he should get the most delegates, period.
Yeah, well, I mean, in some of these states, though, you can get less than that and get all the delegates. But here's the thing, Mica. How does your guy Cruz regain momentum after this Northeast sweep?
Well, first of all, let's not forget he's just won 5 states, including Wyoming, which is a microcosm, really, of voters as we go from the Midwest to the out West.
Wait. Wyoming? I mean, as much as I don't think New York is a proxy for the rest of the country, I would say the same for Wyoming.
Well, I would disagree because for the first time, Cruz was able to carry voters of all ages, voters of all faith. Voters who were young.
How many voters?
In Wyoming, I can't say, but the states combined 1.3 million, I believe.
Well, I know that was a number he threw out there. But what I'm saying is for going after this Northeast swing, Donald Trump obviously polling very well. He's going to have a great night tonight. To what degree, we'll find out in a couple of hours. How does Ted Cruz reignite it, particularly with Indiana? Because everyone's talking California. I think Indiana will decide the GOP nominee.
You could be right, although we plan to take it all the way out to California. But I will say, going back to Ted Cruz, who is in Pennsylvania tonight, his message is resonating well in a very depressed coal region among people that are hobbled with the Obama regulations. So I think that he has the opportunity to win.
Ted has a small problem, and that is in the month of April, if Donald Trump gets 180 delegates, Ted Cruz is going to be mathematically eliminated. So the bottom line is really very simple. Does Donald Trump get the 1237 on the first ballot or not? And if it does go to a second ballot, Ted Cruz could have a very big shot because he's been outmaneuvering Donald Trump left, right, and center on the delegate game, and that's why Trump's been having to make campaign changes.
And, of course, everyone knows that Ted Cruz has said over and over, Kasich is mathematically eliminated. Why is he still in it? That same argument, Mica, will be used against him once he is told mathematically eliminated. All right, guys, let's leave it there. We know the stakes are really high for Republicans tonight. We're talking 95 delegates and a major momentum shift. The candidates making their final push. We're going to break it all down, how the New York delegates are allocated and where we go from here. Next. So Ted Cruz skipping New York tonight, at least watching it in Philadelphia. But his wife, Heidi, she did speak with our very own Trish Regan earlier today on the Intelligence Report, and she claims that Ted, well, he just loves New York. Take a listen.
We've got New Yorkers heading to the polls right now. What is it that you would like them to know about your husband?
Well, I want New Yorkers to know about Ted that he loves New York. Ted and I both lived here in New York. And I believe, and Ted does too, that New Yorkers are strong people. They're industrious people. They want results. And I think that that is what they're going to see.
Joining me now to discuss Mica Mosbacher and Betsy Woodruff. Mica, there's a report out that even if Ted Cruz comes in third, his campaign thinks he'll get at least more than half the delegates, even before the folks there vote. What do you think the impression is when people hear that kind of stuff?
I think they see a winner. First,
you don't think they see a cheater? They don't see someone who's bending the rules? You don't think that they see that their vote won't count?
No, he outmaneuvered Donald Trump, which was kind of a wake-up call for him. It took months to get the boots on the ground in Iowa and months to get the boots on the ground in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania and in Indiana. And it's something you can't do overnight. So we have, for example, 23,000 Women for Cruz volunteers. We have a daily phone call. We talk about strategy, and we have activists and women in this party who are calling their friends and colleagues in these states and in the 18 congressional districts, for example, in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. Sorry, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I got you. So, yeah, Betsy, I mean, listen, it is the game. Donald Trump became famous with the art of the deal. A lot of people saying his big problem is that he didn't want to spend a lot of money. He has been unorganized, and maybe he took $1 in free TV time for granted.
Without a doubt, certainly. And the reality is that to win a presidential race, you kind of need to understand how the rules work. And all evidence indicates that Trump's team didn't grasp the importance of being competitive at some of these conventions where delegates got elected. They didn't grasp the importance of doing a lot of the nitty-gritty, granular, on-the-ground organizing that you have to do if you want to be competitive at a contested convention. It sounds like Trump and his team sort of got caught up in the moment, perhaps, over the past 6 months or so, started buying their own spin that they were inevitable and missed some of the really important nuts and bolts that successful campaigns do. That's going to be a liability for Trump at the convention, no question.
There's no doubt, though, a few times that we kept hearing that we'd have we'll run the table after XYZ, South Carolina and others. But on the other side of this, though, Betsy, the voter, particularly the apolitical person who just kind of feels like his or her vote does not count. Now, maybe they can be upset with Ted Cruz. Certainly they have to be upset with the system, no?
Certainly, but I mean, those voters are going to be extraordinarily upset when they find out about the Electoral College, when they figure out what happened in 2000. I mean, the reality is that these election rules are not as simple as you might be taught in a high school civics class, right? There's a bunch of moving parts. They're kind of complicated. And yeah, the fact is, some voters in some states, their votes have more power and more influence on electoral outcomes than in others. I mean, look at Republicans in the Bronx. Yeah. Republican votes in the Bronx are magic fairy dust compared to Republicans in other states.
There's an article in the New York Times. There's a woman in the Bronx, a GOP voter, is like the most powerful Republican voter in the country. I forgot her name because there's so few of them. All right, I got to tell you, we keep hearing revolt on both sides of the aisle. This is the time, people. If you want to make a change, you better make it this time around. You know now how unrepresentative the system is. In the meantime, the question is, here tonight in New York, will Donald Trump get over 50%? Will he win all of the delegates? We're going to go back live to Trump Tower with my man Conal McShane when we come back.